Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Dimitra Brown, Senior Director with the DEC Network. For those of you who aren't familiar with the DEC Network, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization helping entrepreneurs start, build, and grow their businesses. Of course, we do that through a variety of ways, and one of them is bringing awesome entrepreneurs into our community and connecting them with the founders in the Dallas market that are also doing great things. Part of my role, I lead our Southern Dallas expansion strategy, which allows me to provide leadership to the work on the ground at the DEC at Redbird, as well as our partnerships with UNT Dallas and Paul Quinn College. Additionally, I do work with a collaborative called the Build Collaborative, where I provide oversight in driving inclusive entrepreneurial growth for small business owners right here in the DFW. So I'm so excited about this conversation that we're having today. I'm honored to have John Henry with me. John Henry is a serial entrepreneur and investor. He is currently the co-founder and co-CEO of Loop, an insurance technology company that leverages AI and data to create more fairly priced auto insurance products for all. He has been named to the Forbes 30 Under 30, Inc. Under 30, Adweek Creative, the Root 100, and Ebony Power 100 list. John, thanks for joining us and welcome to Texas.
Hey, good to be on.
Awesome. So I think, John, we may be catching a little feedback there, but I think you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're perfect now. So first, let me say this. I learned about you and kind of your trajectory as an entrepreneur from your show on Viceland. I believe it was Hustle is the proper name for that, right? So yeah, tuned into that maybe a year or so ago and really started following you and your journey as an entrepreneur, which is definitely inspiring. But for those in our audience here at the DEC Network that aren't quite familiar with kind of your start and your background as an entrepreneur and how you got going, could you just start off with giving us a little introduction to who John Henry is?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. It's great to be with you all. Texas, what up? Just recently moved to Austin, but was in Dallas a
week or so ago.
A week ago. Yeah, some good energy. Met up with Craig Lewis and the Gig Wage folks. I'm just a proud son of immigrants. Immigrant parents, came here from Dominican Republic, taught me to do a lot with a little, and worked a bunch of, kind of different jobs, and found a job as a doorman, did that with great energy, and that eventually unlocked kind of my first business opportunity, which was one of the residents there was like, yo, you seem like a smart kid. Why don't I put you on? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Didn't hold my hand. Definitely no silver spoon, but gave me an idea. And that idea was not really a business idea as much as it was the idea that you can create your own framework for yourself instead of having to fit into the lines of the existing frameworks that are built for us and for you. And that really caught my attention because I felt that I didn't fit particularly neatly within the lines of school, of work. Like I felt like I was creative and energetic, but it didn't feel like those systems were best set up for me to best express myself, best put forth energy, best put forth effort. So that's what it was. And I've just been running with creating businesses and concepts and ideas ever since. I've developed a lot of skills in sales, and then I got really into more branding and marketing, which is it's inverted to sales. So sales is like, yo, let me get your shit, or you're like, yo, buy my shit. And branding is like, yo, here's something interesting that's happening, and then people want to learn about you. And that's really been the big shift in brand building over the last 2 decades, has really been the emphasis on building a movement and creating something with great energy and letting people discover you versus having to rely on a purely heavy sales type of approach. And so when I learned that in 2015, I've been introducing those elements into business building ever since. And I did that with a venture capital firm that was really mission driven in the way that we did things. I'm doing it now with my latest company, Loop. And we did it even in media with a TV show. But yeah, that's a bit about me kind of at a high level.
You know, the interesting thing, John, I think if our audience goes back and they kind of take a look at those details of those transitions, those different movements that you made, I would have to imagine you're a super confident person, right? Because you mentioned you started off as an entrepreneur, you know, someone put you on and gave you an opportunity, didn't hold your hand, right? So you had to figure some things out. But in that process, at some point, you decide to get into the investment side of it, right? You know, eventually developed a VC and co-founded that effort. I would love to kind of understand, how have you navigated overcoming fear? Or was fear ever a challenge for you? But how did that confidence that we kind of see now to try those different things and learn those different skill sets within the business, how did you do that? Or how are you doing that?
Yeah, I would say it kind of came from hip hop, actually. You know, every rapper who's in New York ever says like, yo, I'm the king of New York.
Jay-Z fan, by the way. So
right. But no one really ever believes that they're the king of New York. But you say it, because if you don't say it, who's gonna believe it? And so in hip hop, which is the greatest parallel that I can draw to for our almost use that over assertion of confidence as a defense mechanism for making up for a lack of confidence. And in some cases, getting yourself to believe something that you believe a little bit, but when you're out in the world abroad, it feels like you're having delusions of grandeur to say, yo, I'm worthy to go and start this thing. Right? Like, it doesn't it feel safe to say it in your house? Yo, I'm gonna go start this thing. And then when you step
in the
out
mirror,
into the
right?
world, it
Yeah.
feels drowned out by the grandness that is the world. And so I picked up that tool from hip hop's toolkit of being like, yo, man, I'm the greatest, you know, and not that it comes at the expense of others, but it's almost like I had to systematically indoctrinate myself to let myself know that I was worthy to go out there and get it done. And what's more is, when you do go out in the world and you meet the people that are in the positions where you want to be, oftentimes you see that they're just a regular person, just like you are. And oftentimes you may be more equipped, maybe less so in resources and network, but maybe more energy, more sharpness, more creativity. So anyway, that was kind of the way that I learned to navigate the confidence that you need to cultivate to get through all these different spaces.
You know, it's interesting that you make that parallel with hip hop music and what you're doing as an entrepreneur. I would imagine many of the folks who are tuned in right now, you know, our Disrupt series is really all about disrupting the status quo and the norms of what people think about when they think of entrepreneurship and who those entrepreneurs are and what impact they can have. I think many of us as professionals have used hip hop as the soundtrack or the motivation or maybe even the mindset, you know, the thing that sets that mindset for that tone of things that we do. And even sports, right? Basketball, things like that for the nature, really just help help characterize the way that we approach things that some may deem as foreign to us, but really we're figuring it out and navigating. You already kind of mentioned Loop, so I want to go ahead and touch on that, because I mentioned before we jumped on and went live, I saw your interview on the Breakfast Club where you were talking about Loop and just how you and your co-founder were kind of shaking things up in that industry and the way things are traditionally approached when it comes to insurance. So can you just tell us a bit about that latest venture and how it came about?
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I mean, the first thing you got to do as an entrepreneur is build your confidence in yourself. And the best way to do that is by doing anything that allows you to feel like you did what you said you were going to do. And that could be at a really small stage or varying stages. But you tell me, if you're starting out and your first goal is like, yo, I'm going to solve the electrical grid problem in Rwanda, worthwhile pursuit. But like Hove says, there's much bigger issues in the world I know, but first I gotta take care of the world I know. So when you're an entrepreneur starting, the first thing you have to do is develop your own confidence in yourself with the present venture that you have. And I want you to relieve yourself of the pressure that this one venture that you're doing is going to be the venture that you're doing for the rest of your life, the venture that's going to, pop off. It's not, like Loop is popping off for me, but I'm 4 deep right now.
Facts.
And in the first one, I learned how to sell, knocking on your door. In the second one, Co-Found Harlem, I learned how to brand. In the third one at Harlem Capital, I learned how to raise money. And now at Loop, I get to combine all of these skill sets. I get to something that it's a vehicle that has sufficient complexity that it's worthy of raising capital for. There's a big brand play behind it. There's a sales. And now I've gotten to the point in my maturity as a business person such that I can step up to the plate of a big issue like the $256 billion a year industry that is insurance and say, hey, this shit is broken. I know it's broken because the stats are clear. Communities of color, young people pay 2 times as much as people that live in upper middle class neighborhoods and are highly educated, which means mostly white. Now, it's not a race thing. However, insurance is it's the often overlooked player in the financial services industry. A lot of people pay attention to banking and investments and wealth management, but insurance sits underneath all of that. You can't get a house without it being insured. You can't make an investment in an investment property without it being insured. You can't get on the road without insurance. And so it becomes it's a required product that gets overlooked. And if you think about it, it's kind of like a regressive tax because you pay insurance up front. Before anything happens, you got to pay it.
In case something happens, yeah.
Sure, in case something happens. So it's like you're in Vegas and you're just like, well, fuck, all right, let me pay up just in case. But the byproduct ends up being these insurance companies are enormous. They're incredibly well capitalized. They've become very sophisticated in that they make their money off of investing those premiums. So they collect the premiums up front and then they make their money by investing those into stocks, making 7% on your money. And then when you have a claim, put you through a hell of a nightmare to get your money. And then if you win, then they say, all right, bet, take this, I give it to you. But they done made their money on the investment side of the house anyway. So it's disconnected from the consumer from that perspective. It's disconnected from the consumer in the sense that the models that they developed to underwrite customers were developed in the 80s. We didn't even have cell phones in the 80s. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have Google. We didn't have social media, all which to say we didn't have modern data. So if you think about the questions that you're asked when you are being priced, it is, what's your age? What's your job? What's your zip code? All things that are really just the insurance carrier is building a picture of who you are. That's their job. But what data inputs are they using to build a picture of you? That I'm a blue collar worker living in a poor neighborhood, not making a whole lot of money. The industry will classify you as that person's a risk.
High risk, yeah. You see that in so many forms.
Cool. Except let's think about that. Actually, right? Blue collar, lower income, low income zip code. Oh yeah, you're a risk. Oh, affluent, went to Harvard, lives in an affluent area. Yeah, that person's a good risk.
Yeah.
I want them. I don't want them. So since I don't want them, let's play this out. Since I don't want them, the best thing I can do to disincentivize them is to increase the rate, right? Because you are less likely to buy a product if it's more expensive for you. So now, then this is systemically true. And also, this is approved by regulators. So this is the way that things occur at the moment. The way insurance works is customers that receive the best rates, those rates are subsidized at the expense of people whom are on the opposite side. So the way your pricing works is you say, okay, I want this risk pool, therefore I'm going to charge them less. And since I'm charging them less, I got to make that up somewhere. I'm going to charge these people more. That, by the way, is ethical, and that's okay if you're making your assessment based on how likely they are to be involved in a car crash. But what's not okay is when you get into all this dog whistling, which also exists in venture capital and in every area, because now the actual byproduct is it has literally become, hey, if you're affluent, mostly white and well-educated, and almost everybody else is considered a bad risk. And I'm having conversations with reinsurers where they'll say, hey, well, the people that you're insuring, and I'm not the type of guy to let stuff go. So I'll just be like, okay, yeah. So who do you mean by the people, by the way? And I like watching them squirm. Oh, urban people. Okay, yeah. What do you mean by urban? And I just press and I press because of what I want to expose them to is that like you guys they're not even consciously aware of the fact that the entire weight of the system is exerting incredible downward pressure on select groups. And it just so happens that these groups are the least well equipped because there's no one who's fucking black in insurance. There's no one who's of any, like there's zero representation at the reinsurer level of these communities' interests. And so I've gone long, but I want to explain the problem with great context so that people know that it's not a super ill-intended system, although I make it sound like that sometimes for the sake of getting people hyped up. But what it is a system that was designed by people and by rules that were not considering any other reality other than the realities of the people that made the rules. And so the outputs can never be considerate of what it's like to have student loan debt, or so on and so forth. So anyway, so Loop is changing all that.
I love that. So, I'm listening to you describe, not only describe what Loop is doing in challenging norms and disrupting the status quo, but I'm hearing the way you speak about that, right? And just your ability to articulate the inequities that are associated with what's wrong. I'm curious though, what has that been like for you navigating this space, this new venture, knowing that what you're building is rooted in addressing gaps, disparities, right? That's kind of been since the past summer, right? Huge talking point, huge area of focus. But what has that been like for you as a founder? With a startup? Yeah.
It's a great question.
A vocal founder, by the way, right?
It's been helpful and hurtful, I would say, but more helpful than hurtful. It's hurtful in the sense that you will be, if you are listening and you are building your brand or business off of this mission-driven theme that I believe very strongly in, however it is that relates to your product or service, you will be cast type into this bucket of, oh yeah, they're the diversity people. Like when we speak to reinsurers or whatever, it's almost for whatever reason just assumed that you don't have a quantitative basis and foundation to your business case. So It's hurtful in that sense. You will be grouped. However, that's where the hurt pretty much stops, because if you are able to develop, and there pretty much always is a quantitative foundation to be able, in other words, you got to know your shit cold, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me move away from like, technical speak and be like, you got to know your shit cold. If you say, yo, I'm doing this for diversity, and then someone grills you and then you flop, then yeah, you're going to be cast type, and it's not going to be helpful. If you use mission as a propellant force and know your shit cold and are able to say, yes, in my industry, 40% of this equals 2% of bump, and just like follow up, you're jabbing with the mission, and then you want that knockout punch to be, and I know my shit. So then, for example, when I was on the fundraising trail, I'm ducking and weaving, and people are saying, all right, cool. But auto insurance is competitive. I'll be like, okay, yeah, but people are spending their budget largely on TV and traditional mediums. Okay, cool. But you have Progressive, you have Geico, you have all these budgets. So what are you going to do about that? So remember, to anyone who's out there raising funds, every question is a jab, you duck, and you just got to make sure that you have anticipated all these movements. So then people have only focused on pricing as a value proposition. If you look at the market today, safe drivers save 40%, 15 minutes and 15%, 30%, 20%, save 7 minutes and 7, 6, and 5. I'm like, dude, what happened to the people?
Yeah.
It's so over-indexed for the numbers. What happened to the people? And so that was my argument. And then I couldn't prove out the fact that people first insurance would resonate. But now we got the numbers. Now I know for a fact, because we have 11,283 people signed up for our wait list from all 50 states, fans and cold alike, different personas, from young white college kid to young couple to single mom to 28 to 32-year-old highly educated Black male who works in education, to everything in between. People are converting. We're putting the content in front of them. They're clicking through. This is the funnel. The first layer of the funnel is awareness. They discover you. This is why I always talk about content. You cannot be discovered if you are not, or rather, you increase your odds of being discovered if you're producing content. If you're not producing content, then you have to rely on paid advertising spend, which you often don't have that budget when you're a startup. You're relying on press, which is cool, but then someone else is telling your story. So content is the way to fuel awareness. After awareness, what's the second layer? Interest. They land on your website and say, wow, I kind of like this. Then the next layer is understanding. They start to develop an understanding about who you are. Then the bottom of the funnel is engagement, trial, purchase. When you're in the engagement bucket, that's where our funnel stops, because we can't sell policies until we're approved. But people are clicking and joining the wait list. That's a conversion for us. Okay, cool. People of all backgrounds are converting. And when we run paid ad spend, we're converting at less than 1/10 of the industry average. What does that tell me? And what does that tell anyone listening? The reason I'm going into great detail, it's not because of the loop story. I'm explaining the mechanics so that people can understand how it is that you view a funnel, and how it is that you can carve white space. Because at first glance, insurance seems mighty occupied, because you just liberty, liberty, liberty. You got all these fucking jingles all the time. And so it seems
nonstop.
It seems well covered. But if you look closely in your industry, whether you're in cosmetics, you might be in e-commerce, you might be in fashion, what seems well covered oftentimes is only but an inch deep. Insurance is running an inch deep. They are just saturating you with ad space so that when you go to buy, you think of their jingle and you go buy. And guess what? That's been working good enough. But what happens when an industry player comes through and builds a mile deep?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
cares deeply about the communities that we insure and allows our customers to buy equity in the company and donates net premiums to a local small business and enriches the product experience and gives you insights on your mobile app about which roads are dangerous and calls you to when the moment you have an accident because we have telematics data and we can tell when you've been in an accident and develops a playlist so that you can jam with Loop as you're in the car. Like, what happens to this enormous industry that is not considerate of you when you have a player that has the customer deeply in their psyche? What happens to your positioning from a marketing perspective? What happens to think about it, and just on the vein of standing out, if the entire industry that you're in the case of financial services, almost everyone uses blue.
Mhm.
Geico's blue, Progressive is blue, Insurance is blue. And then if you cross over to banking, everyone in banking uses blue. Chase is blue. Uh, uh, all these banks, Citibank is blue.
Mhm.
Achilles blue. Oh, they're all blue. So now think about this for a moment. For anyone who's looking to disrupt an industry, you will notice that there will be homogeneous nature even in the visual expression of these brands. So it becomes an easy opportunity to stand out because visually all the incumbents look the same because they all came up in a cohort. So you can distinguish yourself visually. You can distinguish yourself in your tone of voice. You can distinguish yourself in what mediums you choose to advertise on. You can distinguish yourself in how you find the product. You can distinguish yourself in a lot of ways. And all of those things translate into advantages that you must exploit as a startup if you want any chance of winning. And that's what we're doing at Loop.
So I have a question from the audience, and then I have one that builds on that, right?
Yeah.
I'll start with Micah's question. And by the way, everyone is tuned in. Feel free to drop those questions in our chat. We'll make sure to get those to John. So Michael Williamson asks, what ancillary systems and industries do you think need to also see this type of disruption, right? So if I'm hearing you talk about what you're doing in the insurance space right now, I'm definitely inspired and encouraged. But what other areas of opportunity do you think we need to have on our radar as far as founders and entrepreneurs?
I hate to say this, but every industry, because I don't think people are fully grasping the magnitude that is the COVID-19 pandemic. And the fact that we've had a decade of change occur in 1 year. Things that were already happening were expedited and accelerated and concentrated into 1 year as a result of this macro event. And so 2021 and beyond is uncharted territory. We are in the first year of AC after Corona. Every industry is getting a major makeover and rehaul and retooling of their industry in a number of ways. For example, some of the lower hanging fruit ways are who represents the industry, i.e., when Cadillac goes to make a commercial, they're tapping Killer Mike. They're tapping Regina King. They're tapping, what was her name? I think they did something with Tamika Mallory.
Yeah, that was yeah.
So watch that. From a low hanging fruit perspective, who the people that represent industries change. And that, in my view, is one of the ways that people at the ground level, i.e., where we are, can most readily cash in on some of this change. For example, I am not the caliber of talent that can yet command a national campaign, but I for sure can command some local budget campaigns, some local influencer stuff. So we're going to start to see an allocation of this monies go to that typically would have gone to X person, now go to Y person as a result of this changing in the guard and who represents the industry. Also changes in whom is representing the industry internally at the corporate level. We're seeing a lot of high profile hires from chief diversity officers, which is spilling into VPs and so on, boards and so on. But also change on a whole other end of the spectrum, which is a lot of businesses that had not invested in a web and digital infrastructure and thought that it was a nice to have, was confronted with the rude reality that in a world where there's no offline, there is no other way to consume you. And so what we are living in is a brand dominated market environment where if offline is not an option, but the customer still needs to buy their shit, there's a reason why the top 5 businesses in the world got even bigger, because we are gravitating brands that we know and trust. And the only way that you can even have a shot at building trust is through the production of content. So anyway, but there's that. But then there's also, like, think about it. In sports, we shifted to esports. And in concerts, Travis Scott did a live stream experience with Fortnite, and the rise of NFTs and the rise of audio consumption, and the rise of TikTok completely democratizing the field against Instagram. And like, there is no shortage of change right now. And when there's change at the top, there's opportunity at the bottom. And what you do over the next 2 years, if you give me 24 months, looking to build your presence on the web in whatever way is authentic to you, you will be able to meaningfully cash in on the tail end of those on the next 2 years. Whoever locks in for these 2 years is going to make a lot of bread the next 2 years. If you don't lock in these next 2 years because you're comfortable, you will become vulnerable in the next 2. If you don't lock in the next 2 years because you're lazy, you're not going to have a shot in the next 2. Whoever locks in these 2 will have the chance to meaningfully improve their situation on the back half.
And that latter point, John, do you mean that for the entrepreneur on their personal brand, in addition to the brand they're building with their business? Or can you elaborate a little bit more of what aspect you're speaking to there? Both.
I mean that even for the non-entrepreneur.
Professionally.
Like, you're representing an organization, Dimitra. You building up your thought leadership by sharing your thoughts on the regular on LinkedIn leverages the organic reach. The number one platform with number one organic reach right now is LinkedIn.
Yep.
And then TikTok, and then Clubhouse. You leveraging that by sharing your thoughts on LinkedIn builds your value. If you do that for the next 2 years, it gives you options for the next 2.
Yeah.
If you're running your business, if you lock in for the next 2 years, investing into the platforms of the future, it gives you options in 2 years. And what do I mean by that? For example, if you grow your presence now on a Clubhouse when it doesn't immediately seem valuable, but in 2 years, a lot of ad budget starts pouring into Clubhouse, then whoever has 50,000 or 100,000 followers is going to be the first person to get a check.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to put it simply, from Kindle or from Spotify that wants to host exclusive weekly Clubhouse sessions, and they need a host and they need someone who's got a big room, they're going to go to not someone who's brand new on Clubhouse. So anytime you're ahead of the market, when the market catches up, you're the market leader already. So now is the time to be investing into the future of whatever you believe your industry is, even if it means that you feel like you're there alone, even if it means like you're compromising things that are making you money in the short term, even if it means that you are investing some of your cash that would have been free cash flow into this infrastructure. No matter what it means, I want you to invest into what you believe the future of your industry is going to be. So when that future comes, you are ahead of the curve and set to capitalize.
Definitely. You must have been scanning my LinkedIn. It needs a little bit more work and engagement. So I appreciate that. Listen, I was going to save this part for a little later in the conversation to kind of get into your VC experience. But Mario, I'm not sure if Mario is based here in Dallas, but I know for us as a capital market and kind of where we are, the early stage pre-seed to seed realm is still a developing piece of our market, right? A lot of our funds are investing in latter stage ventures. So this question, I think, is going to resonate with a lot of founders here in the Dallas area. His question is, what advice or actionable steps would you recommend an early stage venture founder of color take that is having trouble getting into the right circles for funding and capital access?
I think it's a good time to raise money right now. I think that, especially the question is for founders of color, I think it's the best time in the history of funding, specifically VC, for founders of color to get money. More and more funds are increasingly aware of the fact that their deal flow is overly white. More and more funds are increasingly looking to talent pools and founder pools of color. More and more funds are actually imposing a mandate that they must hit a certain amount of diverse founders that they're backing. So this is exactly what I was speaking on the last question, which is if you're developing your presence in the market, by the time the market catches up, you're ahead. You can take the same thing in the venture context. If you are in your field and you're building your brand and you're top of mind, oh, Mario is that, he's that dude when it comes to audio software. Then when the market catches up, as it has caught up, and now everyone's looking at diversity, the best known diverse founders will get the money first. That's not to say that if you're not well known, you won't get money, but the best known founders of color will get the money first. Harlem Capital is exactly that situation. We invested in building out our brand and our infrastructure before any of the shit that's going on now. George Floyd happens, 2020 happens, the entire financial system pumps colossal amounts of money. Harlem Capital's fund 2 is $134 million. It's the largest diversity-focused fund in the country. We invested in our presence first. Now, I know Mario's asking for actionable steps, and I'll get there. But conceptually, it's more important to understand the strategic, conceptual reality, and then back into tactics.
Steps, yeah.
So in other words, get out there and get known. Twitter, whatever. And second is, it's the best time. So now, with that said, some actionable things that applies to all founders raising money is like, a lot of times, I'm just going to keep it a buck. A lot of times founders' decks are garbage. But here's the problem, that VCs are in the business, they're in the people business. A VC, I've seen it so many times myself, will never tell you when your deck sucks because they want to be liked more than they want to be helpful. Because their business is to be liked. I'd much rather let you down softly so that you can say, you know what, John was real nice about it, than to say, yo, your deck needs some work, my guy. This shit is trash. Now, of course, that's not very helpful framing. However, a lot of material, I think, and that's not a criticism of the founder. Let me
It's criticism
contextualize
of the VC. Yeah.
Let me contextualize this a little bit. Your deck probably sucks, but your deck doesn't suck because you suck. Your deck sucks because of a lack of exposure to good decks. And that comes from a lack of exposure to the venture culture. And that is systemic of the lack of exposure historically that there's been to funding networks. There is a lot of depth there, I promise.
Yeah.
Now that people are saying, hey, I want to fund people of color, and then they say, wow, but man, these people, man, these Black and brown founders, their materials suck. They don't know to speak. I feel safer with a white kid who knows the CAC LTV ratio that I'm looking for. And so there's good intention change, but if you look deeper, the founders that are getting the bag are Black ex-Googlers and people who have already had the exposure to these networks. So it's the next best thing you can do is understand that it takes a lot of exposure through proximity to deeply understand the venture concepts. Because I'll tell you this, I'm just going to keep it a buck. The moment you have the wrong answer for a question, you're kind of like, if it's a question that's considered basic, for example, so first came up in this game, like for me, a $20 million exit was fucking huge. Yeah. Or 50 million. Now it's like in venture, like just even having the balls to your first question to say, hey, we're growing $1 billion business. We're growing $1 billion business and we're raising a big round. We're not raising a small round. Right? So Mario, this is to you. When you go out there to raise, your natural inclination is going to be, yo, let me raise a small round so I can hit up less people since I'm not super plugged in. And therefore, I will increase my odds of raising a small round. That's exactly why you're not raising a round. Venture only responds to the biggest thinkers in the world. Venture only responds to hey, yeah, we're raising a $2.5 million round at a $10 million valuation. We're doing, and yeah, but you don't have product. How you're doing that? I know I don't have product, but we have the tightest team. Here's our strategy. You got to know your shit cold. It's not just talking a big game and not having.
Back to your earlier point, yeah.
Yep, you got to know your shit cold. However, venture only responds to big thinking, big execution, bombastic storytelling about world-changing shit. If not, then here's what happens. Hey, yeah, I'm raising a 500K seed round. Immediately, the VC's thinking, damn, every other business that they're competing with at this stage is raising $2.5 million. So this business is not going to be able to compete with whoever's raising $2.5 million. And they must not think that they can go and raise real money because they're going for the small round. So now let me offer a super helpful little actionable tip here. And that is, position your first round as a pre-seed round, because in the pre-seed round, you do have room to bring in 250K, 250, 300K. And I want you to go and get these 250K to 300K from angels. And a lot of times angels don't consider themselves angels. So don't go looking for angels, because the angels that say that they're angels get the most deal flow and it's most competitive. What I want you to do are find people who work in your industry, whom are older, who've been making 200K for 20 years, and they most definitely have 20K that they can put to work. They most definitely have 10. They likely have 50, but they feel comfortable with 20 to 25. I want you to convince these unsophisticated but relevant industry angels to give you 25K, one check at a time. It doesn't matter if they're local or not. Investing is now geographically agnostic. Go round up 250K. Take that 250K, make magic with it. And when you go to raise your seed round, promise me that you will not think small about the size of your round. I don't care if you feel scared that you may not hit the size of your round. I felt scared after having raised $40 million, proclaiming, this is me being honest. I've had doubts that I would raise $2.5 million for Loop. That was our goal. And initially we were like, yo, we actually felt like we could raise $1 million. And I knew from having worked at Harlem Capital and built HCP alongside those boys that you have to think bigger. So what I did was I took the initial round size that I was going to go after, which is 1.25, and we fucking doubled it for no reason. I'm raising 2.5. What's good? Oh, really? You sure this is a big industry and is real competitive and it's back to that hip hop shit. Yes, and what's the problem? I mean, don't come off so aggressive. I know I'm aggressive at the moment because like that's how you got to be with yourself. And then there's a line because then if you're aggressive, then you're going to be the angry black person. But the point is double your shit. And by the way, we oversubscribed our 2.5 million. We came in at 3.25 and we had $4 million of worth of commitments. That's not me bragging at all. That's actually me showing you that the venture markets only respond to delusional, so that when you go and you raise $1 million and you have trouble, but you see someone raise 4 and you're like, yo, what the fuck? I'm having a hard time raising $1 million, but they went and they raised 4. That's because the person, she who leans towards raising 4, is signaling that they have the confidence to change the world and go and think big. I hope that was helpful. That's about as real, by the way, as you're ever going to get it. And this is not from a kid who read a blog about VC. Like, I am one of the maybe one handful of people of color under 30 who have raised an institutional venture fund.
Thanks.
And I happen to care enough about you to give it to you real and say, yo, this is the way it is. If you do not think this way, you will get cast type as, they're just thinking too small. So there it is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So many nuggets being dropped. I got to go back to something you mentioned though earlier when we first, went live here, John. You spoke to, hey, I was in Dallas a week or so ago, connecting with Craig Lewis, who's the founder of Gig Wage right here in our city. And I think in that post you mentioned just like how important it is to build with fellow founders who've kind of walked a similar path. I think you shared that on Instagram and just like how critical that connecting is. So I want to ask you 2 questions. Why is that so important? Unpack that for us. And then number 2, we got to know, why did you choose Texas as your go-to-market state? And if you want to zero in on why Austin, that would be great as well. Would love to, sure my Dallasites would love to understand that as well. But yeah, we'll start with that building community with other founders.
So Craig, we had a hard time actually raising money for Loop. Because we were thinking too big. So this is the double-edged sword of what I was just saying. On one side, this is the irrationality of venture. On one side, you're thinking small, and then they're like, they're too small. And then you think big, and then they say, well, they're thinking big, and a big industry is very competitive. And a lot of the VCs that I hit up that I had worked with prior, they took that gentle pass. The pass I'm talking about that I had shared earlier. They give you some vanilla reason, but they don't actually dig into why not. Every once in a while, you come across someone who is truly helpful. I mean, opens up their Rolodex helpful. And sometimes it's not the people that you expected. And oftentimes it's a fellow founder who's been through the ringer, who knows what it's like to be counted down and out, but has pulled through and can spot real when they see it. And the biggest value that I got on my time in the fundraising trail for Loop was not from any VC that I had met over the last 4 years of being a VC that I had co-invested with or anything. It was actually from founders. And so I think that the greatest value that is often not talked about, because for some reason there's an overglorification of VCs. VCs are but overglorified asset managers, nothing more than a fucking banker. You know, they're a banker. They're bankers, but they happen to be in a sexy industry. And so people, oh, VCs. I don't know why we don't have more founders on panels and so on, because the founders is truly the one creating value. Subject for a different day. However, Craig Lewis opened up his Rolodex and said, yo, I got you. You raising? Intro, and just opened up his cap table and said, yo, I got you. And guess what? When all those people then took a pass, he said, man, what's going on here? I got you. Made another round of intros. And one of those intros ended up becoming our lead investor, who wrote us a $1.6 million check in one wire because of Craig. And the next biggest check I got from an introduction that my homie Saint Laurent from Squire made. And he said, yo, I got someone that could be interested. Now, he had already popped off. So if someone pops off, and I think his business is now worth $250 million. Shout out to Song. If someone who just hit a $250 million valuation says, yo, my boy's raising, you might want to take a look, they're going to take a look. My second biggest check came from an intro that Song made after I had completely exhausted all the VCs that I knew personally, that I had co-invested with, all this fluff. That's why the VC bond is, I don't think it runs anywhere near as deep as a founder bond. So that's why I'm a really big proponent of building with your peers. It's more tempting to give a fuck about what Fred Wilson has to say, but what do I care about what Fred Wilson has to say? The fuck do I care about Mark Andreessen? I'd rather listen to Craig Lewis than Mark Andreessen. I'd rather listen to Saint Laurent than Steve Case. No disrespect, they've done their thing, but I'm in the trenches with my peers now, and they're going through what I'm going through now. And, you know, it's just a whole different era. So that's the value of building with founders. And I chose Texas because honestly, I thought about a lot of different places. We thought about Jersey City, too close to New York, Hartford. There's no soul in Hartford. The hope is gone. No offense, Hartfordites. Virginia, little too political. North Carolina is cool, but people don't really have that local pride like that, except for, you know, Fayetteville with J. Cole. LA, it's just too utopian, too pretentious. The Bay, way too expensive, and everyone's talking tech. Everyone's a tech bro. Colorado, I like Dorado, but just felt a little too, I don't know. Seattle, cool. Portland, all right. Too rainy up there. And then I was like, oh shit. Yo, what about Austin? Now, Texas is our first market for Loop. So we will be live in Texas in June. So it's our go-to-market. Colossal state. Tons of people of color. Very big auto market. Great cost of living. Solid weather. No income tax. You start adding all of these up, and you're like, man, Texas starts making a whole lot of sense. Mark Cuban did tweet me and had me come to Dallas. He was like, yo, come through. It's cheaper out here. But ultimately, I didn't go Dallas because I was already coming from a big city. And I wanted to try a small city for a change. And so I found myself in Austin. But Texas is a great market, man. For anyone, like obviously your whole network is Texas based. It's a great first market to go live in for any product. Because it's really representative of the rest of the country, in my opinion. A lot of white people, a lot of people of color. Not enough Dominicans, though. I'm not seeing too many Dominicans.
You might spark the Great Migration here to Texas.
Yo, funnily, my media director is Dominican. My head of business development is Dominican. Our paid ads person is Dominican. Our software engineer is Dominican. So I think just with moving 5 Dominicans over, we've Dominican population 30%.
It's on the rise. John, you dropped a gem. I don't want to gloss over the point about the peer-to-peer connections, because that resonates even in the professional realm, right? When we're navigating our careers, we're always thinking about the executive director I need to connect with, the CEO, but it's like the person that's really who's got your best interest in mind, and sometimes it really has the time and capacity to pour in you, invest in you. It's probably the person alongside you, right? Not maybe in your organization, but that peer-to-peer relationship. I thought that was golden.
Yeah, it's worth double clicking on because I think it's that important. And I've really been stressing that for a long time. And I don't think people, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's sexier to go after, for example, if you're starting a podcast, everyone is going to go after the Gary V's,
Gary V. I knew you, yeah.
And so on. And like, I'm signing. The whole point is, I would much rather interview the people on the ground, even though they're not going to have that name recognition that's going to drive whatever. I'm like J. Cole. I would rather my shit go platinum with no features than to go platinum because you rode off other people's features. If that makes sense, right?
You have good musical taste. I'll tell you that right now. Jay-Z, J. Cole. It's really good. So.
Oh, shout out to Cole, man. When's that album going to drop, man? Fuck.
ASAP, hopefully. Now, for me, John, I could number one, I could talk to you for like another hour, and I'm sure our audience could listen. But I'd love to kind of get, what thoughts do you have to kind of leave people in closing with? I will say this at the top of the hour, I mentioned Disrupt is a part of a series that we're doing here that is building on the work that we started with Dallas Startup Week with our Disrupt Dallas kickoff. John, slight plug. I'm hoping we can get you back in Dallas for Disrupt Dallas and Dallas Startup Week. It's one of the biggest entrepreneurial convenings here in North Texas. So we hope to have you be a part of that in some capacity. But what final thoughts do you have for people, entrepreneurs, or even just, folks who are navigating these spaces, trying to disrupt and challenge the status quo?
Yeah, I love it. I would just say there's been an unprecedented amount of change occur in the past year. It has most definitely created uncertainty in the marketplace, but that uncertainty today is our friend tomorrow. There are all kinds of industries that formerly had a grip on the way things were, and this change has left them scrambling, and there's all kinds of white space for you to go out and capture. For example, Mario, who's asking about founders of color, record number of founders of color getting the bag, record number of influencers, actors, musicians being recognized for their talents, record number of people being promoted into positions of power, record number of new industries being created, record number of industries merging and colliding. And I feel like we should consider ourselves fortunate to be of age such that we can think critically and make bets on the future. I think the way I'm viewing this next 18 to 24 month stretch is literally picking bets on what the next back half of the decade is going to look like. And if you're okay not having immediate gratification for the next 3 to 5 years as you I think it'll actually be sooner. I think that for the next 3 years, if you pick your bets and go all in on those, I think it will meaningfully change the back half of your decade. And for me, that big bet that I'm making is I'm making a bigger stage bet because I am betting on diversity. I am betting on the change of the guard. I'm just also mixing it with the financial services industry. You can apply whatever you're seeing in your respective industry. Could be NFTs, could be music, could be econ, could be economic development, whatever. There's change there. See how you can work these changes into your respective industry. And for anyone listening, if you're listening right now, I would appreciate if you head over to loopinsure.co and join the waitlist. Texas is our first market, and Dallas is the market where we are most significantly competitive. Our rates are significantly better than Progressive and Geico, specifically in Dallas and Houston, to a great degree. Fun fact. So for anyone listening, if I brought an ounce of value, it would mean the world to me. Seriously, I'm going to watch the wait list. In fact, I'm going to pull it up now and literally watch it live. If you head over to loopinsure.co and you join the wait list, it means so much. If you tell your friends that there's a new insurer in town that's going to shake shit up, it means a lot. If you follow me on the gram and reach out, I will respond. And just in general, Julia just joined. Thanks, Julia. Kevin Pleasance just joined. Thank you, Kevin. I'm watching. Fun fact, we are, sorry, this is in closing.
No, go ahead.
First, or I'll put it this way. We are opening up our next round of funding to the thank you, appreciate it. So what does that mean? We are putting our money where our mouths is at, and in a world of institutional funding where there's minimums and all this other stuff, me and my co-founder are diluting our shares to create space for our customers to buy equity in our company. Because I believe that we need to meaningfully support the same communities that we insure. And I almost want to put Geico and Progressive and all these other startups on skates and say like, yo, you're not doing your part as an insurer in the community. We're going to show you what that looks like. I want to thank Micah Williamson. I want to thank Mario for joining the waitlist. I want to thank Leah Frazier, Kanisha Washington. Thank you. Raquel Henry. Kafui or Kafui. Thank you. I want to thank all you guys for joining the waitlist. It means a lot. This is the biggest impact thing that we can have right now. We are proving to the venture community and to Silicon Valley, who told me to my face that people would not respond to the message of equity in their insurance. And I said, isn't that a privilege that you get the best rates and think that equity is but a marketing ploy? But for our community, it's not a marketing ploy. It's a demand.
Yeah.
I will show you by ringing this bell, and people will respond to it because it's not a marketing ploy. It's not a value proposition on paper that's just fluffy. This is what we demand as consumers, and it's being proved out every day. I've never seen another insurer on the Breakfast Club. I've never seen another insurer.
Me either.
Yeah. Flo can't hang there. This is the culture, and we're proving that out. It's loopinsure.co. That's where you can join the waitlist. Thank you, Jameer. Thank you, Oliver. And thank you to the DEC network. What a great conversation it's been. It's been really great. Thank you, guys.
John, you're so dope. I think your energy it really represents, I think, the tone of the culture right now, and kind of what we're demanding, what we're expecting, what we're pressing. That's a word that you use quite a bit. And even the fight, right? Your reference and analogy with the jabs, like, I'm going to steal that, It's just so critical, and I think it personifies this moment that we're in. And I think if you guys don't take anything else, there was a lot of gems. A lot of gems were dropped.
It was a good amount.
It was a good amount. So you should definitely take that. But also I would encourage you to take that John Henry 2021 energy and start pressing folks. So John, I just want to thank you again for joining us. You know, it's been an amazing chat. Would love to continue the conversation and however that can happen. State of Entrepreneurship Deck Network audience is coming up on May 5th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's a celebration. You can go online and register for that. We do have an in-person option. And again, this series that you're witnessing right now with our amazing kickoff with John Henry is the beginning of a 4-part series where you'll have an opportunity to hear from more folks who are disrupting the industry and challenging the norm. So thank you, everybody. It's been our, go ahead, John.
Say just one last thing. I would love to go and do something in person with you guys. I am not too far. It is but a 3.5-hour drive. Let's do something this summer. If it's a good time for you guys, you let me know. I would love to activate in Dallas. What? And me and Craig, we do like a Black FinTech thing out there, and we just hold what? Let's go. Let's do it. Let's turn it into a podcast interactive session. I'll go down with our content crews, and we'll make it a fun time. I love your guys' city, and I can't wait to be there in person. So I'm just throwing that on the table right now, committing live that we will do something in person whenever people feel comfortable and it's prudent. So,
John, say less. Everybody, you heard it here. John will be in Dallas this summer. We're going to make that happen without a shot of a doubt, man. We need to hear more of you here in Dallas. So everybody, remember that. You heard it here. John Henry's coming to Dallas with the Deck Network and the Deck at Redbird.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a nice evening.
You too. Bye.